What is up, everybody, and welcome into the show. Appreciate you tuning in to the podcast. Yet another episode of Crush Fantasy Football. I am Bryce Lockridge, your host of the show. Today, guys, we're going to be talking about buy low trade targets. We're going to be talking about guys that underperformed in week 2 and have underperformed through the first 2 weeks of the season, but I still have very good reason to believe these players are going to be money plays for the rest of the year. Right now, we can buy low on them like we should have done on Marvin Harrison Jr. last week if you watched my buy low trade targets videos last week. And we're going to be aiming to get these guys on the cheap, because for the rest of the season, they're probably going to go off. So I'm going to start right here with the first player on my list, and that's Ja'Marr Chase. Now, this is a guy who's come out and only gotten 11 targets through the first 2 games. We have a track record with Ja'Marr Chase. We know what kind of player he is. At this point in his career, I can tell you this concretely about Ja'Marr Chase. He is not a player that gives you a super high floor. There are going to be weeks where he busts, but he also has the highest weekly ceiling in fantasy. We displayed that his rookie year. He's really displayed that throughout his entire fantasy career. This is a player who gives you a decent floor and an astronomical ceiling. And when you total the fantasy points at the end of the year, he probably will be a top 5 wide receiver. Yet again, it's only a matter of time before he breaks out and has that 35-plus point PPR game and wins you a week. He's going to do it multiple times this season. He's a great buy low right now. And on the targets that he has gotten, he's caught in 10 out of his 11 passes. We just need to see him be targeted downfield a little bit more. I think this is just very much because of the fact that he was holding out pretty much all training camp. The dude wasn't on the field practicing with Joe Burrow, and now he just needs some time to get reintegrated into the NFL at game speed. We're 2 games in. I think game 3 is where we're going to see the Ja'Marr Chase breakout. So let's go ahead and buy low on him while we have the chance. Next player on my list is going to be Patrick Mahomes. This is a guy in Patrick Mahomes who only had 151 passing yards this last game. But if you look at it, we have a track record with Pat Mahomes. This dude has been a top 5 fantasy quarterback in fantasy points per game every single year except for last season when he was the quarterback 7. And this is a dude who is going to light up the scoreboards this year. He's still got Travis Kelce. We have Rashee Rice emerging as an elite wide receiver 1 in the offense. And we have the field stretcher speedster in Xavier Worthy. Pat Mahomes has more weapons than he's worked with in a while. And I very much think that despite the recent fantasy struggles and Pat Mahomes being a slight bust for fantasy purposes last year, I think that Pat Mahomes is going to break out this year. I think he's going to be a top 5 fantasy quarterback in fantasy points per game yet again. In fact, I think he's going to finish as the top 3 quarterback overall. Right now is a great time to buy low on Pat Mahomes, coming off a game where he only had 151 passing yards. This is not going to continue. This dude will bounce back. It's Pat freaking Mahomes. Go ahead and buy low on him while you have the chance. Next player on my list is going to be Mike Evans. Now, Mike Evans has only had 12 targets through 2 games. Chris Godwin has been the alpha in the offense. I called this going into the season. I said Chris Godwin moving back to the slot, he's going to eat up the majority of the target share in the offense this year. That's very much been the case so far, but it's still Mike Evans. He's still going to have weeks where he outperforms Chris Godwin. We saw it happen all last season long. He's a great buy low right now coming off a bad week, and he had a great week 1. It's like he only had 1 bad week, and people are already ready to jump ship on him. You could go ahead and buy low on Mike Evans right now while you have the chance, because people are basing everything off the last thing they saw, and the last thing they saw was Chris Godwin be the dominant target getter and fantasy producer in this offense. So people will literally sell Mike Evans off 1 bad performance. Buy low on him now while you have the chance. Next player on my list is going to be Garrett Wilson. Now, Garrett Wilson only had 57 receiving yards in this game. I mean, obviously, he was a little bit underutilized after getting 11 targets in week 1, but 17 targets through 2 games, 8.5 targets per game on average is certainly not bad. We know that Garrett Wilson is an elite talent. He's got one of the best quarterbacks of all time in Aaron Rodgers throwing him the ball. And I think from an arm talent perspective, Aaron Rodgers still looks very good. He obviously doesn't have the mobility that he used to have. We need to see the Jets offense perform a little bit better before we could say, like, Garrett Wilson to the moon or anything like that. But he has one of the best arm talent quarterbacks still in the league in Aaron Rodgers throwing the ball. He is an elite talent. And almost every game we see this season going forward, he's going to have more than 6 targets. We need to buy him low on the dip right now while he had a lower target share this past week than he's going to have in most games this season. Look for him to have a lot of double-digit target weeks in this offense. And right now we need to buy low on him coming off a game where he only had 57 receiving yards. Next and final player on my list is going to be George Pickens. Now, this dude only had 29 receiving yards in this past game. And obviously, I mean, it's going to make at least a slight difference whether it be Justin Fields starting at quarterback or Russell Wilson. But George Pickens is a guy who's going to come out, and he's one of the most elite talents in this league at the wide receiver position. He's going to be targeted more as the season goes along, only 11 targets through 2 games. This is what I like to do when buying low on players early in the season. We look at players that have small target shares, fluky small target shares early in the season, and we know their target share is going to go up based on their role in the offense. George Pickens is by far and away the number one wide receiver in this offense, and he's going to have double-digit target weeks. He's going to see at least 7 targets every single week. 4 targets is an absolute fluke. This was a very low-scoring game. The Pittsburgh Steelers had the lead the whole time. They didn't really have the need to air the ball out because they knew that the Broncos couldn't score, so they were running the football and playing defense. George Pickens essentially got scripted out of this game. This is a dude who most weeks is going to go off in fantasy, whether it be Justin Fields, whether it be Russell Wilson. You can expect George Pickens to produce a lot better going forward, and he's a great buy low right now. All right, guys, appreciate you. Make sure to buy low on these players while you have the chance, because if they go off next week, and they probably will, you're going to lose your opportunity to buy them. And, yeah, just like Marvin Harrison Jr. last week, we lost our opportunity to buy him. So you've got to get these guys right now. Appreciate you guys. Thanks for tuning in, and thanks. I'll catch you later.